Hey guys, so I'm going to keep it as short as possible as we talk about single player early, mid and finally late game. We'll go through each era and I'm going to talk about diplomacy, war, cultures, events, civics, resources, independent people, wonders and many more. Now I always play on standard, 6 players, normal map, normal pace, no peaceful mode. As for the difficulty, I managed to beat the game on civilization difficulty and I've been playing for almost 50 hours now. The AI gets the following bonuses on this particular difficulty. Now, when you first start a game, you should switch your scout to auto-explore because it knows exactly where every curiosity is located and you need to get as many as possible. That doesn't mean you should let it on auto-explore indefinitely. You still need to properly explore your surrounding areas manually. Once you gather enough food and get more scouts, make sure they don't go for the same curiosity. Just keep them all far apart. As you explore, you'll come across lairs and sanctuaries which spawn animals and you should definitely take a turn to pillage those as they give 20 food. That's another scout or potentially another pop in one of your cities when you choose to disband it. You'll come across mammoths as well, they give 20 food plus 20 influence. You should fight it 1v1 if you have the heal bonus or if the mammoth is on a river tile, because in a fair 1v1 fight you lose. As for the bears, they give 10 food and 10 influence, they can easily be taken down, defend for the first 2 turns, attack last turn. Probably by now you have enough influence to place your first outpost since it only costs 5 influence. Take into consideration rivers, they will allow you to get more food, therefore higher population. The terrain, you want your outpost or future city to be in a defensible position. Resources, luxuries and strategic resources, you could potentially get a lot of stability from luxuries as well as food, gold, industry or science, and even more once you research patronage in the early modern era. If you're lucky and come across a natural wonder, consider making it yours as they all seem to give 5 influence, 10 stability and 10 gold. But personally, I would not go and start a conflict because of it. You don't want to go to war in the early game, you want to expand. Keep in mind that in Neolithic Era you have no penalty for non-adjacency, so you're only paying influence for the territory and everything that's in it. This is why you should place outposts further apart and later on claim what's in between. Like I said, you're not looking to piss off your neighbors, unless your strategy is to conquer everything, but even then you still need to build infrastructure to sustain your war. You should have 2-3 outposts by turn 15-20 and you should think about advancing to the next era, but make sure that you find 10 science in order to get the legacy bonus. I usually pick food, but you can pick whatever suits your strategy, just make sure that you get it. Now, you could stay a few more turns and farm some more scouts, which later translates into more population because animals and habitats only give food in Neolithic, but keep in mind that the longer you stay, the less fame you're getting because fame decays every turn. And also the AI might pick your favorite culture, which probably is Harappans and has already been picked. Now, when it comes to choosing an ancient culture, the one that I just mentioned, the Harappans, is without a doubt the best pick. Their unique building is very good and contributes massively towards one of the most important stats in the game, which is population. And also their unique unit which ignores forest penalty and can move 5 tiles, collects curiosities very efficiently. But you won't probably be playing as them. Then go for Cho if you are near mountains. The only problem for this culture is food. Or pick the Egyptians, high production and an exceptional hit and run emblematic unit. In Ancient Era, you need to focus on getting famous, and you do that by earning stars. You only need 7 to unlock the next era, but you can and should get many more. Now that you have your first city, first of all you need to get another city up and running as soon as possible. Build a pottery workshop first, that way you'll be able to evolve, plant, and attach outposts faster, and start working on getting those expansionist stars faster. This will also help you get to 600 plus influence, and you will also be able to enact early game civics faster. To earn stars and fame, you need to focus on remaining strength first. For example, you picked Egypt and you need to build districts, mainly Maker's Quarter, but you can also earn some fame by building some Farmer's Quarters and growing your population faster. You could also build some Market Quarters in order to get some merchant fame. You need to research writing for this, but you should prioritize this tech anyways because it gives you 50 fame if you're the first to research it. Something that could help you get more cash is trading with the AI. Let it have access to your luxuries, but be careful when it comes to strategic resources. Plus 5 industry per copper, that means every copper. So if they're buying copper from you, you're losing 5 industry. If they're buying horses from you, you lose 5 food. You should however buy more of these yourself. If you have multiple copies of a luxury, you should definitely sell the surplus, because only 1 copy will give you the bonus. If you're not a scientific culture, you'll have to rely on scouting to get some science early on. Another thing that you should be doing to min-maxing everything is to choose expert policy and place the population where it's important. Keep in mind that ideally your city needs to create a new pop once every 2-3 turns at all times. Also keep in mind that your city doesn't exploit science nor gold. You need a research quarter / market quarter or a unique quarter that does. Now I know we're all struggling with influence in the early game. We need to plant outposts, attach or evolve them, but you need to take into consideration the 4 cultural wonders that you can secure and build in the ancient era: the pyramids, hanging gardens, Temple of Artemis and the Stonehenge. Personally, I prioritize pyramids, then Stonehenge. Modified district industry cost by -25% is going to save a lot of time, especially if you're going to gain the most fame by building districts. And Stonehenge, if you're wondering what co-religionist states are, basically every nation that follows your religion. You can get 50 fame if you're the first to build a wonder. Once you reach 10 population, you can start working on creating your own religion, and you should definitely do that because there are multiple benefits for each strategy, and you also stand to gain 100 fame if you build a holy site first. If you really want that 100 fame, go with personal rights, but by picking communal rights, you unlock procession, which lets you buy stability with gold. It's very easy to get your religion across the map. You just need to have a higher faith output than the others. Now that you're in ancient era, we should talk a bit about events. The reason why I'm mentioning events now is because in Neolithic era, they all have a positive outcome, but from now on you stand to lose gold, stability, or even food production and so on. For example, in the Darkest Depths event, you could get -1 combat strength or -1 movement speed for 10 turns. In the Flooded Lands event, if you don't pay 120 gold, you can get the Flooded status. Later on in Industrial Era, you could potentially get the Panicking status if you're not willing to make a small sacrifice in the Night Stalker event. In general, the bad outcome can be avoided by paying some gold. It's also in Ancient Era when independent people will start to spawn. They're basically barbarians plus city-states from Civ 5. They'll start to spawn in Ancient Era, and there are 2 types of independent people: peaceful and violent. By default, both will attack you, and seeing that this can be very annoying when your goal is to build, expand, and evolve your culture, you should consider throwing some cash at them. Not influence, because you probably want to attach outposts at this point in the game, unless you're competing with another Civ for the same independent people. You should refrain from bullying them though, as this will create diplomatic issues with other civs, and you also don't stand to gain much. Towards the end of this era, it's time for you to bring back your scouts and convert them into an army by first disbanding them, thus increasing your population, and then slowly build some archers and warriors. You can disband some scouts when you evolve your first outpost, thus giving it a boost in population, but make sure you have enough food. If you want to keep on exploring, and you should, make sure you do so with stacks of 2-3 scouts. This way they don't get bullied by every unit on the map. Now, before going into the next era, make sure that you get as much fame as possible by min-maxing everything. It does not matter if you've reached 7 stars, stay a few more turns. Preferably you want to complete at least 3-4, maybe even 5 categories. Don't worry, stars for your main category will carry over into the next era. As for the new cultures, there are a few strong ones, for example the Maya, Celts or Carthaginians, if you have cities on the coast. The Huns, if you're going to war. At this point in the game, the AI might be ahead in fame, but don't worry, you will catch up. In Classical, we're going to talk about stability and diplomacy. Now, the stability value ranges from 0 to 100. You want it to be as close to 100 as possible and above 30 at all times. You're probably starting to have some problems related to stability in this era, and one way to improve your stability is to build holy sites, and by building those, you're also helping your religion spread faster and further away. You could also build garrisons, which by default give 5 stability, but if you grab the Raise Monuments tenet, that also gives 5, and on top of that, you build a city watch and you end up with 15 stability per garrison early on, which also helps in case you attack. Later on in the Industrial Era, you could build a police force and get another 10 stability. Of course, when it comes to stability, we have to mention the 4 wonders in this era: the Statue of Zeus, the Mausoleum, the Colossus, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Most of the time you'll have to pick the Statue of Zeus or the Mausoleum. If you pick the Mausoleum, build it in the city that produces the most science per turn. As a final tip, when it comes to stability, you get +5 stability per unit standing in a city. This is the era where you should also start focusing more on science, even if you're a builder or agrarian. Build schools and libraries, you'll fall behind in tech if not. Keep in mind that if you're playing as a scientific culture, you can research techs in the next era as well. You're not bound to current era in the tech tree. If you're not planning on going to war, prioritize techs that are at the top. Bottom is filled with military techs. Another way to get science early on is from having an alliance with another culture. You'll both get +5% science. You can go even further and sign a cultural agreement to get +5% influence, and that 5% is out of your total output. Now, the AI is hesitant at first, then depending on what you're doing and how you react to what they're doing, they're going to become friendly, then pleasant, and here you need to push for an alliance, and then finally bound. If the AI has an aggressive attitude, that doesn't mean it's going to declare war. It means that it's going to make demands more often, which if not accomplished can lead to hate-filled and probably war. If the AI is afraid or it has an appeasing attitude, you might want to make some demands as they're likely to accept. But if the attitude is condescending or tyrannical, that means the AI is much more powerful than you. Check out each AI's archetypes and strengths when you first meet them. It's important to know who is likely to betray you and who can be a loyal friend. Another important thing about having an ally is that when they discover a natural wonder, you get the fame for discovering it as well. But what's even more important is that you can ask for help if someone declared war on you. Alliances will not last forever though, but what you can do to keep them active for as long as possible is to trade, sign treaties, and forgive their mistakes. You need to understand that some AIs just want to see the world burn. Going into medieval era, you and the AIs will have to choose just as before between 10 cultures. Only difference is that this time around there are 3 militaristic ones, so expect more conflict. In my opinion, you should have around 4 or 5 cities with 1-2 outposts attached to them and should be ready to advance to the next era. I know I previously said that you should stay and get as much fame as possible, but it's a bit tricky this time around because you want to pick a Maya in medieval. The Barré building has the power to win you the game just by itself. Just a small tip here, always check the notifications before making any moves or changes. Now you're presented with the choice between the medieval era wonders: Angkor Wat, the Forbidden City, Notre Dame and Todaiji. For me there's really only one that matters, Angkor Wat. You'd pick Notre Dame if you've fallen behind and you need more faith output, and the Forbidden City obviously if you want to do some fighting. I think now would be a good idea to talk about war. First of all, playing on a higher difficulty is well, obviously different than playing on a easier difficulty, but what I mean is that the AI is not smarter, but it gets more bonuses. Like I stated at the beginning of this video, the AI gets more industry, more food, more money, more science, they even get a combat bonus and a shit ton of stability. Before thinking about going to war, understand the risks. Does your enemy have an ally? If so, you might end up fighting on multiple fronts. Does your enemy have a high war support? If your war support drops to 0 before his does, you'll be forced to surrender. Is he a militaristic culture? Then he probably can defend for a while. Are his cities in a defensible position? You might have to cross rivers, go around mountains. If you really want war, then you should pick a militaristic culture first of all. One of the bonuses that you'll get will be plus 30 war support. That means that you can declare a formal war without grievances or demands. Well, why not declare a surprise war? 3 reasons. You lose more war support than your opponent. Second reason, you get a nice traitor badge which makes other empires gain more war support against you. And third, the other cultures will hate you. If you have an ally, ask him to join you. Now, during the war, the ultimate goal is to drain your opponent's war support, and you do that by taking cities, pillaging resources, and winning battles. Whoever retreats from a battle loses war support. During the war, keep in mind these combat modifiers. While at war, don't forget about infrastructure. Your cities need to grow at all times. Now, if your goal in this war is to become liege, you should occupy as many cities as possible. If you manage to do that, you'll get 50 fame and probably a vassal as well. As for the army composition, keep in mind that knights are unable to climb fortifications. That means they cannot take cities nor attack those inside them. Have some melee units and some archers. Keep the archers safe as they get -8 combat strength when defending against melee units. If you need more units, you can rent troops from independent people, but in order to do this, first you must improve relations with them. At least 60 for peaceful independent people and at least 10 for violent independent people. Keep in mind that a forced surrender is more favorable to you. This way you have a larger stock of war score. You're probably well aware now that it takes longer to get fame in other categories than your main one. Do get as much as possible, but don't get greedy as we got 2 wonders to choose from. As for the next culture, Mughals, Ming, Joseon in that order. So you have 4 options when it comes to cultural wonders: Machu Picchu, St. Basil's Cathedral, Taj Mahal, and Topkapi Palace. Ideally you want to grab the palace, then go for Machu Picchu, or just pick one of the 2, production or food. The Taj Mahal seems nice at first glance, but then you realize that calm city means above 90% stability, which is not really possible in most cases. You should rush the movable typeface tech. If you research it first, you'll get 50 fame, but most importantly, you can build the science buildings faster. In fact, you have 4 science buildings in this era, and you should build all of them because industrial and contemporary are huge eras. In this era, you can also build some settlers and go settle on another continent or on some distant islands. This goes without saying, but you should have a military presence on the map at all times. And since early modern gives you gunpowder, go ahead and make some new units. Now I know I haven't really talked about civics. It really depends on your strategy. Are you focusing on science? Then choose civics that help you with that. As long as you care a bit about influence, you'll be fine. One thing that I should mention is that you don't have to make a choice each time you're presented with a question, and that you can cancel any civic in case you change your mind later on. The AI seems to make lots of naval units in this era, which means he has fewer on land. might wanna take advantage of that. In this era, you'll discover two new resources, coal and oil. Or maybe you won't see them at all, because there's actually a bug at the moment, and you can legit have only one resource on the whole map. Choose the Siamese culture if you want more production and gold, Italians for stability and influence, or the Germans for combat strength and production. But if you're not being bothered by anyone, I think you should push forward with the French. Now, upon entering this era, you'll have to choose between three wonders, three very strong wonders: the Statue of Liberty, Big Ben, and La Tour Eiffel. If you focused on production the whole game like I have, there's really no need to go for the Eiffel Tower. Big Ben will help a lot through these last two big eras. If you focused on science in the previous eras, then the statue is perfect. You stand to gain 200 fame in this era just by being the first who researches electricity, the first who completes the symposium, and the first to build a railway line between two adjacent cities. This is the era in which a big game-ending problem appears: pollution. Keep in mind that makers' quarters and farmers' quarters don't generate pollution on their own, but certain infrastructures may provide them with pollution properties on top of extra bonuses. Now, there are two types of pollution: global and local. If your city is producing under 50 pollution per turn, there are no effects. If your city reaches 50 pollution per turn, that's minus 50 stability and minus 50% food, faith, influence, science and money. As if that's not bad enough, when your city reaches 125 pollution per turn, the stability will decrease by another 5 and all the others I just mentioned will be at 0%. On the other hand, global pollution will affect all cities on the map. Minus 50 stability and minus 10 food when the global pollution reaches 60k, and minus 100% stability and minus 20 food when it reaches 80k. At 100k pollution accumulated, the game will end. So how can you slow down the level of pollution? Well, by building a wind farm, a solar farm, a hydroelectric dam or a nuclear plant. Problem is, these come a bit too late. Alternatively, you could plant some trees. Before going to the last era, the contemporary era, you get to choose a culture for the last time. If you're planning on conquering every nation, Soviets can do it. If you want to research every tech as fast as possible, Turks with their public schools can do the job. Probably the best culture. In most cases, the pollution will end the game prematurely. First and foremost, you should go for a research institute to get more fame. Then if you're not being bothered by any neighbors, just go straight for the very last text to get even more fame. The AI in my experience will not look for a fight in this era, instead it will try to build a spaceship but end up polluting the whole map. If you can build a nuclear weapon, that's another 50 fame. Now, I haven't really talked about cultural transcendence, but the 10% bonus is not really that much, and to be clear, if you choose the same culture in the next era, you don't get an improved district or a new emblematic unit. You get nothing. You get only a 10% fame bonus. The game clearly wants you to switch cultures each era, and I tried to give you the best options. You need to understand that in the end, it's the fame that matters. Not science, not gold, nor food. It does not matter who sends a mission to Mars. It does not matter who gets every star in the contemporary era. These are just conditions that, when accomplished, the game ends, and the player with the highest amount of fame wins. So let the AI focus on ending the game, while you focus on getting famous. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.